Bismarck Historical Society's monthly program. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm really impressed by how many of you must have been really sick of being stuck inside. We're willing to come out on such a cold night. We're grateful for it. It's going to be a good program tonight. My name is Emily Sackerson. I'm a board member with Bismarck Historical Society, and it's my privilege tonight to introduce our speakers, because I'm the one who roped them into it. And because I know these two women so well, I'm going to stick to my script. I'm going to introduce them without any color. You can get that from me later.
Without any wine.
So tonight, we've got two archaeologists from Metcalf Archaeological Consultants. Damita Engel, she's been there for 20 years with Metcalf, and she has a team of archaeologists, historians, and support staff who do all sorts of projects across the region. She also serves on the City of Bismarck's Historic Preservation Commission currently. Her personal research interests lie in the spatial studies related to Knife River flint, a tool stone that's found in North Dakota and that was traded by Native people for over 13,000 years. Recently, Damita's passion for bone fish hooks has taken over, and in her spare time, she tries to make headway on publication. She does some really interesting stuff, and she's got lots of different interests. Signe Snortland is also going to be presenting tonight, and she's a principal investigator with Metcalf Archaeology. She's got extensive experience in all levels of the regulatory framework that protect our cultural resources. She's worked at the Department of Interior, the Bureau of Reclamation, and was the chief archaeologist for the State Historical Society of North Dakota. She's published in Smithsonian Institution Press, Plains Anthropologist, North Dakota History, Journal of Archaeological Society of Southwestern Manitoba, Papers in Manitoba Archaeology. The list goes on and on and on. And of course, she was also an incredibly dedicated member on the board of directors for the Friends of the Railbridge advocacy group, which I know many of you supported. So not only are they former colleagues of mine, my old boss, and my childhood best friend's mom, they also are close friends of mine, and I've learned a great deal from them, so I'm really excited for them to share some stuff with you tonight. So please make them feel very welcome, Damita and Signe with Metcalf Archaeology.
All right. Hello, everyone. Tonight we're going to take you through 3 different sites that Metcalf has worked on over the last few years. We're going to first go to the downtown Bismarck Historic District, where we did some monitoring. Then we're going to go out to University of Mary, searching for evidence of the Battle of Apple Creek. And then we're going to wrap it up going north of Bismarck to the Larson Village, which I've titled The Road Runs Through It, which if you've been out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We'll get to that. First though, I want to just touch base on why we do these projects. In 1966, there was a, it's already starting on, so that's great. There was the National Historic Preservation Act that was enacted, and it basically defines how federal agencies have to meet their statutory responsibilities of trying to identify and mitigate adverse effects to historic properties, which are the cool sites, the ones that need to be protected. So that kind of is the hook as why Metcalf is doing this work in most cases. If there's federal funds involved, we need to go check it out before work happens. And that's what all 3 of these have in common. So first we're going to go to Bismarck. Picture it, Bismarck, circa 1875 for Golden Girl fans. The buildings pictured here all burnt down during the fire, but they were rebuilt pretty much in the same places when they came back. But to that end, the city knew that they needed to do more brick instead of wood. And of course we have Hebron nearby, so there's lots of Hebron bricks zipping around the area to try and make it more fireproof too. So when the fire happened, a lot of the random artifacts that would have been deposited, garbage, if you will, were pretty much cleared out after the fire, and then the buildings were rebuilt. So while we have a few of those pieces that might be remnants in the streetscape underneath the roads, there's probably just not a ton, but we didn't know at the time if there had been. So our job was to watch when they reconstructed the roads downtown in the district, looking for anything remnant like that from earlier times and all the way through up to the last 50 years. So the project was doing road repaving. They did some more water line work when they had the streets torn up, of course. A lot of utilities underneath there, and storm and sewer repair as well. The 3 streets were 4th, 5th, and 6th. That's where the main focus was. And then it went from Main up to Thayer. We realized that on 6th Street, the project went further than that, but 6th Street between Thayer and Rosser had been obliterated a long time ago and replaced, so we didn't have to monitor that. So, what did we find? We found lots of bricks. That's probably the number one thing, and I'm not showing one picture of bricks, so not interesting in my book. Paul Demers with DOT would beg to differ with that. He's a brick aficionado, but so they didn't open up this whole entire area. They were opening up what they needed to in order to do their work. So we were getting these little glimpses in the downtown area. How many people walked downtown when all this was torn up? So you probably saw a bunch of holes and thought it would look really boring. And most of the time it was, but the work that they did, because it was so painstaking and they were working around utilities that we still need. These are all the fiber optic lines coming out of the utilities building across the street from the city county building. They had to be careful, so they were constantly watching, and we were watching with them to make sure they didn't hit anything historic. So lots of stuff to avoid. So randomly, we did find historic features, and that's where the fun begins. Everybody know where Bricktop Oven is? Bricktop Bakery, yes? Okay. Right in front of that alley, that's right next to it, they came down on a feature, and in that feature was a piece of trolley track. And we kind of figured that there might have been something left of the trolley because it went down 4th Street. But the interesting thing was this piece of trolley was not where the trolley track was supposed to be. We're like, wait a minute, trying to triangulate. Why is there a piece of track right here? Well, it's because that piece of track was repurposed at some point in the past. I'll get back to that. But first, let's explore what the trolley track looked like. So this is Main Street, and unpaved roads at that time in the 1910s. This looks down Main Street, and then the track curves onto 4th. So we knew it was 4th. There's some speculation if it was on 5th or 4th, but that's why we do research. The backstory on the trolley is that they used the North Dakota Capital Improvement Funds to construct it. It was powered not by the downtown steamworks, but by the state capitol steam generator. So the line ran all the way up to the Capitol, all the way down to Main, and then all the way out to the 12th Street Depot east of town. So it was quite a ways. The state operated the trolley line, trying to get individuals that live down closer to downtown to and from the state capitol every day, plus the mail and some other random things. But then they were like, you know what, the state isn't very efficient running things like that, so we should probably give it over to somebody that can do that. So they handed it over to a private company, Hughes Electric Company, and it ran until the Capitol burned in 1930, and they stopped running it in 1931. There's a postcard showing that it was already paved, but the trolley tracks were there. We're not so certain that the trolley tracks were actually still there in 42, or if they had already been paved over and it was just some artistic license there. Because it stopped running in the 30s, so I don't know why you would keep them unless they were begging for it to come back or something. This is the last run that the Capital Trolley made in 1931. So that's fun. So getting back to the actual trolley track that we found, the segment of it was located with a couple of other different features. So does anybody know what this is?
Is this top off of a fire hydrant or a water shut off?
What kind of water?
City water?
Steam, yeah. The top of a steam cylinder. So the steam generation, we had steam heat downtown to all the businesses from 1900s. They slowly incorporated each of the buildings in until the 1960s, and they were like, okay, we're done with this. And they changed from the steam plant to individual gas boilers in the downtown area. So this was kind of fun because we actually had that. We found this in place where we're like, what the heck is that? And then we saw the writing, if you can see it right here. We tracked it down, and it was labeled American Dis Steam Company, which is a district steam company. And so we kind of just were like, okay, that's what this thing is. And there were two of them, plus one extra cap randomly out there. Now this is right next to the trolley track chunk found, right? So we were all scratching our heads. Right next to that, we have a manhole. And it's right off the edge of the other stuff. And so the steam pipes were plugged in this manhole, but they're still doing their jobs. 6 years later, they're still intact, still in place. Good job. Don't know why, but that's good. So putting it all together, this is what we had. We found this square feature was brick under the mortar. The trolley track ran through the edge of it and right on top of the manhole that was dug as well. And what we figured out was that when they went in to shut off the steam and to close that system down in this area, they used the trolley track chunk that they'd probably found during construction during that point to reinforce this feature that they then filled with sand. So they filled it with sand. It's like, oh, we'll just use this trolley track, pave it. So it's kind of a weird one, but fun. The rest of the steam stuff we were finding all over bits and pieces of this all over 4th, 5th, and 6th. The steam pipe shown here is the wood, the top one. So it was a steam pipe wrapped in wood and then banded with metal. That was laying right on top of the storm sewer. And that was cut now for the new stuff. 3 different construction episodes here that we were tracking. Just kind of cool. Other cool stuff that we found. The pulley wheel. So that has a groove on the outside, and it was used as part of the turning on and off of the steam. Does anybody know what the other 2 items are over there? Good job. You get a gold star. So they would actually like lay the pipe and put it on these rollers to get it to run down into wherever they wanted it to go without having to pick it up, lay it down. Yeah.
Where the steam pipe got hot and cold, it expanded the track. And that's what allowed the steam pipe to
go back and forth too. Cool. We were wondering why it was cemented in and just left in place. I was like, okay, that's apparently see, this is why we do these talks, is we learn more from you guys. And then the last bit, that's a bottle base. Anybody know?
Here. Amy?
Well, when we did the window downtown,
Yeah.
I followed those letters, and it's like a carbonated water bottle from Ireland, I believe, where it came from.
Yep.
And they had a round bottom so that they had to lie on their side so that the carbonation, it's like when you lie your wine on its side so it doesn't dry the cork out.
Great.
They had them with the round bottom so that they lay flat. and the corks didn't dry out.
They would also put the round ones on because when they tried to make normal ends, they had a tendency to explode with the pressurizations.
What's the other piece? Which one?
On ring.
That's another roller. So this piece is right here. This is the metal casing, and this is the cement it was encased in, so it should have been upside down, but. So this is old school versus today. So we have the two rollers. Well, this is the machine that they decided to jam things into. And it's all plastic, no metal, no wood. Very boring for the nested archaeologists, so I'm glad we got there when we did. So this is the quiz after the first site. What popular kids' toy was found in an abandoned storm drain?
Roller skating.
Yo-yo. What? Yo-yo?
Cupid doll?
Capitals.
Marbles, all right. 3 agate corkscrew glass marbles dating from the 1910s and 1950s. They were all machine made, but in the research, we found this advertisement for Mr. Peanut marbles. Play the game, be fair, don't cheat, don't play on the street. Clearly someone did not pay attention to the instructions. But, all right, that was downtown. We will next segue to Signe. Out to you, Mary.
Let me start out by saying, I am not a military historian, so don't ask me any military history questions. I'll have to look them up and ask Mr. Google in order to answer you. So at the University of Mary, we had it roped in by FEMA. It was an emergency project to stabilize the riverbanks out at University of Mary. And we, in doing a literature search at the State Historical Society of North Dakota, we discovered that there was evidence that there had been a battle there. When the Civil War was raging elsewhere in the country, the Dakota and the U.S. government fought in Minnesota and Dakota Territory over delayed annuities and cash payments required by treaty provisions. Between 450 and 800 settlers and soldiers died, as well about 21 Dakota. 400 Dakota were arrested for participating in the Dakota conflict, and 38 were hung at Mankato, Minnesota. December 26, 1862. 2 armies were dispatched to punish the Dakota and meet at the Missouri River on July 25, 1863. General Sibley's expedition, which is shown here in an illustration from Harper's Weekly, they marched towards Devil's Lake from Camp Pope in Minnesota, and then southwest to the Missouri River. General Sully's army was supposed to come up by riverboat on the Missouri River, but the river was so low they were unable to do so. They were supposed to meet up on July 25th, and General Sully's army arrived much too late to meet up with General Sibley. So, here's your question. How many Civil War battlefields are in North Dakota?
Yeah.
Well, actually, the Civil War battlefield people would disagree with you. There were many Civil War battles in North Dakota. There are recorded as Civil War battles because they happened during the same time as the Civil War. So the ones in North Dakota all are associated with Sibley or Sully expeditions, these 2 that we just talked about that Harper's Weekly illustrated. The one that we're going to focus on is number 4, which is the Battle of Apple Creek, which was Sibley's expedition that fought on July 29th through August 1st, 1863. The reason that the Minnesota Uprising happened, or also called the Dakota Conflict, was because the Santee were starving. Their agent had not handed out the annuities that they were required under treaty and had not also paid them in gold as required by the treaty. So 4 young Santee, these were kids, took eggs from a farm, and they got in a fight with the farmers, and 5 Minnesota settlers were killed in the fight over food. Fearing reprisal, the Dakota, led by Little Crow, attacked the Lower Sioux Agency, killing 31 and capturing 10, ambushed the military, and attacked the town of New Ulm. And as a result, the Sibley and Sully expeditions headed out to try and find this particular leader and anyone who participated. The one expedition that left from Camp Pope was headed up by Brigadier General Henry H. Sibley. And he was supposed to meet up with Colonel Alfred H. Sully, who was commander in 1863 and 1864 in Dakota Territory. It's called the Northwestern Indian Expeditions. He missed his meet up with Sibley, but he went on to destroy a village of Yankton, Dakota, Hunkpapa, Lakota, and Blackfeet. 500 in all teepees were destroyed there, and many people were killed at Whitestone Hill. And then he went on to fight the battle on Killdeer Mountain, where he slaughtered a lot of Indians in 1864. But we're going to focus on General Sibley to try and figure out, did he make it to the University of Mary before it was the University of Mary, or did he go somewhere else? So we are very fortunate that Colonel Dana Wright, who worked for the State Historical Society, in 1935 went out and walked the trail. This trail was very easy to find because 3,000 soldiers and 1,100 mules and horses had walked the trail. I don't know if you probably can't see this very well. Let me walk over here and point at stuff. So they headed out from Campbell, coming up this way, heading up to Devil's Lake, where they thought that the perpetrators were located. They left 1,000 men up at Camp Atchison, and then 2,000 marched to the Missouri River to try and meet up with Sully. And they were following Apple Creek. So this is another map produced by Dana Wright that is a lot easier to see than the previous one. And if you see that, if you look at the red arrow, that's the approximate location of the University of Mary. Let me read you what a soldier said about the battle. After our toil, weariness, and scanty fare, the savages have eluded our grasp. We scarcely slept last night, working away in the midnight, wearied as we were, throwing up great earthworks, while our foe was, with greatest rapidity, making his escape. Then aroused at 2 o'clock a.m., it was 8 o'clock before we were at the high tableland in sight of the timber of the Missouri, even then it was too late. The Indians were across and occupying the high bluffs opposite, shaking their glasses in defiance, so there was a constant glitter. All, I think, are sick of Indians and Indian war. This was a journal of Sibley's Indian expedition during the summer of 1863, a record of the troops employed by the soldier in Company H 6th Regiment. So though Sibley made it to the Missouri River when he was supposed to, the Indians saw him coming and they escaped across the Missouri River. They had to leave behind their wagons, their horses, all of their equipment, their food. They swam across the river. We do not know how many died in the process. There's no account of that. But let me show you what an account from Dakota Goodhouse. He did his own analysis and talked to elders to try and reconstruct what happened from the tribal viewpoint. So if you look at this map, number 1, so the Dakota and Lakota enter the Missouri River Valley, and then they scatter. Scarlet Point and White Lodge camps head north. That's 2, 3, 2 horns of his father's band go toward the Heart River. 4, elders, women, and children cross the Missouri River. So the women and the children escape across the Missouri River to high ground over there. In the meantime, the war party and leaders take the high ground. If you see that yellow arrow, that's where the University of Mary is located. So the elders and the warriors were up above them in the vicinity of the University of Mary. And Dakota's convinced that they were at that the tribes were on the bluffs at the University of Mary. The Army engaged the warriors on top of Picture Bluff. The Army establishes Camp Slaughter. That's down on the Apple Creek on the other side, across from the University of Mary. Then the warriors leave and the Army marches back to Minnesota. So that's the tribal account of what happened. And this was a triumph for the tribes. They escaped. There's no account of any of the Lakota, Dakota dying in this conflict, but soldiers did die. So now let's take a look at the archaeology, because we're looking for evidence of this battle. So we looked at how archaeologists have researched the Battle of Little Bighorn and other military battles that were fought during a similar time period. They used, and we used similar equipment trying to find evidence of this battle. So the grant that the University of Mary was using to stabilize the riverbanks, they had 3 areas they needed looking at. And you can see the areas in circles here. These are the areas where we did the archaeological investigations, working for FEMA. And I don't know if this is a picture of Matt, or is this a picture he does? This is Matt. Okay, Matt's helping us. Yeah, there you go. You want to stand up and take a bow? He was using a magnetometer to look for disturbances in the earth, so that we were hoping we could find ramparts or ditches or any kind of defensive structures. And then the one on the upper right, that's using a metal detector to look for artifacts. So in all, we surveyed 225.7 acres, and we metal detected over those acres. We had 3 metal detectors that we were operating, looking for bullets, cartridges, any kind of metal that might result from a battle, horse bridle parts, anything like that. We dug 123 shovel tests. We did the magnetometer survey, thanks to Golder and Matt. And then we used a drone to take photographs of areas we couldn't get to. So let me back up here a second. So the problem we had is that these areas are highly unstable. You can see that it's collapsing here. We had to be careful we didn't get too close to that edge. So we used a drone to look at areas like this that we couldn't access safely. And then this was all during the pandemic, so we were supposed to wear masks. I'm on the far left of that photograph with my shirt pulled up because we tried to stay 10 feet apart from one another as we were working. And Shay on the lower left-hand side is operating the drone. We did the shovel tests. We screened through 1/4-inch mesh to make sure that we didn't miss anything small. And then in the upper right-hand corner, you can see us excavating an I-beam. That was one of our really fun discoveries. Digging up an I-beam was something I didn't go to graduate school for. We dug a heck of a lot of holes. And this was in May, and it was cold. We're wearing many, many layers of clothing. Unfortunately, our metal detectors, 2 of them could not filter out aluminum. So we were really good at finding big mouth Schmidt cans. We found a fizzy wrapper. That brought back all sorts of great memories from my childhood. So these are all the holes that we dug in phase 2 upland. And the phase 2 bottom one, here are the holes we dug. If you see a black dot, that means we had a positive, we had a find. Not a good find, but we had a find. And then these are the holes that we dug in the bottom land in phase 3. Did I skip over one? Yeah, here's the phase 3 upland shovel probes, and here's the phase 3 bottom shovel probes. So this is a good example of archaeology. We dig a lot of holes, and we don't find a lot of good stuff. So we did get some artifacts. We got lots of beer cans. I'll tell you, University of Mary, they must drink a lot of beer, and they love to golf. It must be a thing here because they knock the golf. They must sit on the edge of these uplands and then hit the golf balls and see how far they'll go. We picked up hundreds of golf balls. We did not treat them as artifacts because we figured they were recent cultural manifestations. So no, we did not log them. We found 4 pre-contact pieces of cultural material. These included mammal bone fragments, lithic shatter, and 1 chert flake. That was a big moment. 52 artifacts post-dating 1910, which included construction debris, hunting cartridges, lots of 22s, tin cans, farming detritus, including an abandoned piece of farming equipment, beverage containers, we found Shasta, lots of Shasta, they like North Shasta there. And then 10 recent cultural manifestations included tires, hunting stands, an I-beam, gum wrappers, and the golf balls. But We got one military artifact. This is a top hat musket percussion cap, which is a well-known artifact from the Civil War battlefields from pre-1870 sites. So this was our one big moment, our only big moment. The only evidence that we found of the Battle of Apple Creek. So what we have concluded is it wasn't fought there. It was fought on the other side of the river. And if you look at Dana Wright's maps, he shows the army being on the bottomland along Apple Creek. So, I'm done. Your turn. We've got two asthmatics, they gotta take turns.
All right. Yeah, that's good stuff. A little bit different than downtown. Beer cans instead of bricks. Larson Village is up north on the Missouri River, fairly close to Double Ditch. I'm sure you're all familiar with Double Ditch. And the road that runs right through it, it needed to be reconstructed to access the homes down on the bottomlands, and they needed it widened. Well, it goes right through this site. Well aware that the site was there. So working with the State Historical Society, we kind of figured out that we were going to be doing a salvage job on this, where they were going to strip off, the construction crews were going to strip off the top of the roadbed, try to get it as clean as possible, but not go into anything that might be intact underneath that road, because the road was originally constructed in the 70s, so who knows, right? Construction plans aren't that great from then. And then we were just going to salvage what we could out of that, anything that we found. So we were assuming we're going to find 5 or 6 features, or, lots of artifacts, because village sites are lots and lots of artifacts, lots of bone, occupied for, hundreds of years. To place this, this is Sitting Rabbit's map of the Mandan Hidatsa villages near Bismarck. Bismarck is a little off center here. It should be down further, but he was out of space on what they gave him to draw it, so he shifted it over. But it just basically shows how the clusters of all the village sites up and down the river in this area. Getting a little bit closer, you can see the road kind of bows out a little bit, and that was the temporary to get around where we needed to work. And so basically our work went from the tree rows to kind of underneath the bottom trees, and just in that narrow little area. The stripped area measured just 2 meters or 6 feet wide and ran adjacent to the existing road approximately 300 meters in length. It's not a huge area. But in all, we had 54 features identified, most being cache pits, where people would have used them as storage for things they wanted to come back to. But then they would be repurposed as refuse pits and filled up with trash. Just remnants of occupation for a long time. So upper left is the terrace edge closest to the water. And then, because I can't get a big enough piece of paper or screen to show this, the strips are all put together. And what you see on the top is terrace edge, and then a cluster of the features that we've located along this area. And then ditch 1, the interior ditch, is right there, number 13. Lots more features, another ditch, and then it kind of drops off as you get out further. The outer bands of this were occupied in the early part of Larson occupation, and then they retracted just like they did at Double Ditch, pulling in closer and closer. And so I think that's why you see the concentration. Yes, there were lots of people there, but I think it was just because they were using all of it and then they retracted and they kept reusing that same area. So you have lots of overlying features that were found. So the stuff we did find, that's me, by the way, in my hole. I'm very happy when I'm digging village sites, so I was much younger then. I don't know that I could get out of the hole anymore. So the stuff that we found is your typical village, projectile points, so arrowheads, copper beads, specialized tools, composite tools, pottery, gaming pieces, fish hooks, bone fish hooks, catlinite, reed mats, bones, tons and tons of bones. Which was so cool. We liked the bones, but a visitor to the site liked it even better. The infamous DOG was out there. He was a corgi. He was super thrilled. He lived down the road. He'd visit us every day. That dog really, really loved the fact that there was bone everywhere, but he did not understand that the bone was like 1,500 years old and it was gross. And it didn't have any flavor, so he kept stealing them and he's like, yeah, it tastes like crap. But because there were so many bones laying everywhere from what had been scraped off the top of the road, we just let him do his thing as long as he didn't get actually into the excavation areas. It's me in my hole. Basically trying to show you how deep these things actually were and how big. It was pretty roomy once you got it cleared out and I could sit down in there and stretch out my legs. So a typical feature, Gilbert Wilson did this great rendition of what these cache pits looked like in use before they were filled with trash. So there was lots of layering up on top. In most cases, they would either line it with grass or they would fire it first. So it became a pot underground. It would bake the earth. So you build a little fire, bake the earth, and then the rodents wouldn't be able to come in to get to your stuff. So it was actually fairly easy to dig, because you travel away until you hit that harder outer edge that had been fired. So we knew when to stop digging. As you can see, the feature that we did find to the left, that was truncated. So where the road was, that took off the upper part of these features in most cases, and we were finding what was left. But as I'm in my hole, like they're deep enough already, right? So these things were really deep when they were fully constructed. In these features, you'd find lenses of things being thrown away, right? Picture this like a dump site, right? So you empty out your fire pit, empty out whatever you were doing, throw bones in. So you have these like random lenses of different trash in there. And some of these are really complicated, that they were used for a long time. They were used again, so there's multiple features. F7 was cut into the terrace, and F10 was cut into that terrace too. And then above that, there was another lens, and some of these were really hard to discern when you're trying to figure out where one feature stops and the other one starts. Because this is what it looked like. This is a feature. And the longer this stuff baked out, the harder it was to see. So we were putting pin flags or chaining pins in the middle of them, so we'd have something to go on as they baked out. It's a little bit of sleuthing. And then this is having dug half of it. Typically, archaeologists like to dig only half of a feature so they can get a nice profile of all the layers. And as you can see, multiple layers of episodes of dumping in this. Tons of bone, ones that DOG did not get to. And this is, yeah, really big bones, lots of stuff. We found, I don't know if somebody was trying to play Tetris with them or what, but a few bison skulls that were like flipped over on top of each other and their horns upside down on each other. So, who knows what the kids were doing out, right?
The big bones were bison bones?
Most of them were bison, tons of deer, some of the smaller rabbits, I think, and do you remember anything else? Dog. There was a dog burial too, yeah. And then plants, fish hooks. And at the base of one of these, it was nearly impossible to get a picture of it. But as you're troweling the last little bit before you hit the floor, you could make out the rushes that they had put down on the bottom. They're just like these feathery little things. And it was super cool to see that because nobody had seen it for, a really long time. Hundreds, if not thousands of years. So that was pretty cool. This is like kind of a tableau, if you will, a menagerie of all of the artifact types that we found. This pot is in situ, right? That's how we found it. That is the reconstructed pot over there. My friend Wade Hawkinson, who is brilliant at pottery and a whole bunch of other stuff, created it for me. So strongly encourage you to take a look at that. One of the bone fish hooks that I fell in love with. And as I found it, I would always call Kimball Banks, my boss at the time. I was like, Diener, Neener, I found another one. As you do when you find cool stuff. When the HPC in town was looking for an artifact, Emily Sackerson was like, what is the defining artifact that would say transition from pre-contact, the Native American culture, to white culture, that transition when they were meeting up? And I'm like, this. And she didn't think it was sexy enough to put in the publication. It's a metal blade in a bone handle. And that's just like, that's defining characteristics right there of contact. So, in my opinion, that's just, might be a little biased, but. So yeah, there was tons of stuff. The state still has the collection, has not been cataloged yet because there's just oodles of it, and it's gonna take forever to get through. But fun stuff, fun projects. We showed you most of the cool stuff aside from the beer cans. There's a lot of miles on archaeologists that go out and do stuff and don't find anything and just walk and walk and walk. So I'm glad that we could share some of the cool stuff that we do with you guys. And we thank you all for being here and all of our people that made this possible and allow us to present, to share it with you guys. So thank you. Sure.
I know you didn't show me, but has there in North Dakota ever been found essentially an intact cache pit?
Yep.
Can you repeat the question?
He wants to know if there's been an intact cache pit found in North Dakota, and Signe says yes.
Yes.
I'll defer to the expert.
I'll tell you what year it was, but I was a branch. It was probably 1978. White Buffalo Road, which is along Highway 200. It's near Knife River Indian Villages. We found a cache pit that somebody had just walked away from. It was filled with agricultural tools. So there was a deer antler rake, and then there was a scapula hoe made from bison scapula that was decorated, and then there was another decorated hoe. They were just piled one on top of another, and there were seeds in there as well. So it was like, and we found it just as the sun was going down. So we excavated it with flashlights because we didn't want to leave it open with Highway 200 being right there. That was a salvage project. At the time, I think we spent $250,000 doing this archaeology, which to me was, I thought, an incredible amount of money. Nothing now. Digging an Earth Lodge village is really, really expensive. But that is the only intact cache pit that I've ever found.
Were the pits in the building or were they outside?
They were actually in the area around where the occupation was. They were kind of just scattered, and some of them inside of probably pits too. Most of the village stuff isn't been dug yet, so.
You can't tell because that one, the top had been stripped off by the road running through it. You couldn't see whether you were inside a house or outside a house. Usually cache pits are inside a house. Some are outside, but most of them are inside earth lodges.
But when the house is abandoned, then it becomes a refuse pit and they fill it back in so nobody.
So you harvest your grain, you harvest your crops, and you store seed grain in the ground so that when you come back again after the long winter, you come back to your summer village, because this was a summer village, you can excavate, you can get your tools out of the ground and you can get your seeds out of the ground, plant your next crop.
show that arrowhead in your, next to your last, do you know what period that one is from?
This is all from Larson, like when the Larson village was occupied.
Tell me how old that may be then. I mean, what period?
1,200 years.
1200, yeah, okay.
It's called prairie site, not dog.
Okay, and then what is the skull next to it?
Dog, that's the dog.
So I'm curious if maybe you could describe a little bit the sort of the way that archaeology is done methodically, and rather than just digging and sifting, that when it's best practice, it's done in a way that you can sort of reconstruct layers, or what are the spatial relationships that tell you, like, it's not just about artifacts, obviously. Would you speak a little bit to the sort of process of interpreting what you're finding?
We record the location of everything that we find. So we usually work in 1 by 1 meter units. And so we map those in using GPS and a total station, so we know exactly where in the universe that particular unit is. And then we take it down level by level, usually 10 centimeter levels, recording everything that we find at a 10 centimeter level, keeping a portion of it to water screen, so that would go through 1/16th inch, be washed to capture everything like seed beads and anything that's tiny. And the rest of it would be screened through 1/4 inch dry screen. And then you take down the next level. And so you're recording each level, you fill out a form for each level, and you're recording not only what's in the wall, but what's on the floor. So that when you get done, you can reconstruct everything. Because archaeology is destructive. And if you don't record it, you can't reconstruct it. We take photographs, lots and lots of photographs. Thank you for digital photographs. We used to hoard our film and be very careful about it. Now we photograph everything constantly.
And to your question about spatial analysis inside of the sites, that's why we point plot, we map all of the spatial relationships between features and between distances between the ditches and everything. Usually we have more time to do those sorts of things, and that's why it is so expensive to dig village sites, to get to all of that, because there's like hundreds of layers, hundreds of years of occupation there that you have to kind of sift through and figure out what's going on. So no, it's not about just the artifacts. The village job that we were doing at Larson was salvage. It was a salvage job. The road needed to go in. We were in constant contact with the SHPO's office going, listen, there's a million of these things. What are we doing? We can't like do one buys on top of every single thing. So we came up with this strategy to recover as much as we could, photograph it, document it, and then let the road go through. Ironically enough, that road, after we had done these excavations and they reconstructed the road that was so important, the next year was the year of the flood that wiped out the road. So I'm like, well, at least we got the information out before it went away. But.
And I want to bring up tribal consultation. We don't do any of this thing independently. Some of the pictures in the photograph that I showed at the University of Mary was a representative from Rosebud and a representative from Standing Rock Sioux. When we worked at Larson's site, it was with the Mene-Hidats-Narikwa because they are the descendants of the people who built that and lived in that village. So we work with tribes really closely, and we always make sure that they can be in the field if they're available to help us, and help us also interpret what we're finding.
What kind of fish did they catch?
Catfish, totally blanked. Yeah, I mean, it's the same kind of fish that we have today, right? You can go out and fish. They just are using bonefish hooks instead of metal ones.
And considering the amount of fish bone you find, you don't find a lot of fish hooks, and you don't find a lot of weirs or net sinkers. So we don't know how they were, and there's not a lot in the literature about how they were able to catch fish. Fish was a minor part of the diet compared to bison. It was bison. Because you kill one bison and you can feed a family. You kill one fish, well, that's lunch.
You would have told us if there were any human remains, right?
We don't talk about those.
Oh, yeah. But if you find them, then you have to work with the tribe then, right?
Our first call is to the sheriff's office unless we're in something that we know is like well below that, to make sure that it's not a crime. Once he signs off on it, SHPO's office is notified usually right after that or in conjunction with that. There was a tribal reinterment committee that was active. I don't think they're still
There's
active.
one member left.
One.
Tribal reinterment committee.
So they usually work with us, like we might be able to help them if we find something like that, but otherwise they take the lead and they're reburied anywhere.
So nothing like what they found at Double Ditch?
No.
Since 1983, there's been a law on the books in North Dakota, 230627, that dictates exactly how we deal with human remains. Before that, there was no law protecting pre-contact graves. And so I don't know if you heard about what happened at Jamestown, but 3 burial mounds were sold for lawn fill. And we recovered over 100 bodies from there. We didn't protect it because there were no laws. So after that, we went to the legislature and got a law passed. And so there's this process now.
Good for you.
Broadly, the purpose of archaeology is to learn about human behavior in the past. Did you find any surprising behaviors in any of the stuff at Larson?
At Larson? I thought you were going to go back to the beer can, sorry. You went left, I went right.
I can think of one thing.
Yeah.
Human remains in a garbage pit.
Really?
Probably somebody they didn't like very much.
Or, I like to be a little bit more charitable. I think it was probably winter. Ground's frozen. We all know this, right? Like, you're not going to dig a hole. What are you going to do? So.
Most of it was pretty expected.
Can you kind of explain the process of how you go about looking for or evaluating a site where you're not really sure if there's anything there before you get to the digging portion, if there is a digging portion?
Sure.
And I would say in, I don't know, 80% of the cases, there's no digging unless we're talking about 1 or 2 small holes to look at the soil deposition if there's a lot of potential for buried stuff. We usually do a walkover. We do systematic surveys, so we're spaced equidistant apart, 15 meters apart. We walk over an entire area that's going to get developed for a road, transmission line, well pad, whatever. If we don't see anything on the ground, we're still looking through historic records to see if there's any historic aerials that show that there used to be something there that may be covered up or has been plowed up, because a lot of the land now is plowed and where it didn't. So we're looking at the historic records, we're looking at what's already on file at the state for that area, and then we do our boots on the ground. And if our spidey senses start tingling or if we can't see enough, then we go to digging holes and trying to find out if there's anything there.
But first, we usually do tribal consultation. If there isn't a tribal representative with us, then it's important. If it's a pre-contact site, so a prehistoric archaeological site, we need to do tribal consultation before we start digging holes. And we need to make sure we've got a representative with us, a tribal cultural specialist, to assist us in whatever we do. But when we're walking over, and our spidey senses are doing the thing, we're looking for diagnostic artifacts. So things that will tell us how old something is. So at University of Mary, I found out you can date bottle caps. They're just amazing things that none of it I wanted, but many things are diagnostic. Tell you exactly what time period. If you get a maker's mark, you can tell who made something and where it came from. So that's the sort of thing that we're looking for. But we often do the inventory first, we record something, and then we go back and do the research that Damita talked about so that we can do an evaluation to see if the site is eligible for the National Register of the State Historic Registry.
And that's after we talk to our client saying, guess what, you're gonna have to do more or move, which in North Dakota, there's lots of room, so that in a lot of cases, they're just like, okay, nope, we'll move it 100 feet over or 200 feet over. And then some people are like, no, you're just gonna have to go for it and pay us to dig square holes instead of round ones. And they love us when that happens.
And the battle that you were looking for at the base of the University of Mary, at the very end you said it probably didn't occur here, it occurred somewhere else. but I didn't quite catch where you said, okay, is it where General Sibley Park is now?
General Sibley Park is in the vicinity, but there's a housing development where Camp Slaughter is located. That's the name of the camp that they established when they were staying overnight. That when that soldier was talking about getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning, they had dug rifle pits there. And the rifle pits were still visible in the 1930s, but now there's a housing development there, so it's toast.
I have 2 questions. How do you know what animals they are, like, and what the bones?
Sure.
Very intelligent people that study zooarchaeology. So they look at the bones and can type all of those, even like small ones like this. They're like, oh yeah, that's deer or whatever, and that's not me. Yeah.
Yeah, you did my thesis on that. So, I'm so sorry to you. That's hard. It helps if you get the end of a long bone. So if you get mandibles, either the jawbone or the skull, those are very easy to identify. Long bones are a little more difficult. You need to get the ends of the long bones, the joints basically, fingers, phalanges, very easy, carpals, metacarpals. So they are different for every animal. Humans are even more different. We're kind of light boned and slender boned. Birds the bones are hollow. So we have collections of faunal remains or dead animals, like the State Historical Society has a collection, a comparative collection. So if you find just a fragment of a bone, you can go and compare it to a faunal collection, and that helps you identify. Plus, I've got a library of books.
And then when you say feature, is that the cache or is that anything that you find?
A feature is any artifact or anything that you can't move out of a site. So that would be the cache pits. An individual artifact is just an artifact, but features can be pretty much anything. It's just the general term for something that's like immovable from that site.
That's human made.
That's human made, yes.
Are you familiar with the Scattered Village project in Mandan? And then what the Department of Transportation did after that with the videos and the story? Can you talk about that for a little bit?
I don't know if I know a ton more than that. Metcalf was helping out with that project. I know with the Department of Transportation. They found a lot of stuff too. Yeah.
I was involved with the production of those programs and the displays that went into the Mandan Public Library. And we did 2 videos, education programs, one for 4th grade history for North Dakota, one for 8th grade history. And they were done really good by an outfit out of Oregon, I think they were. And they do a good job of kind of explaining some of the basics of archaeology. And I think they still might be available, so if anybody here would want to get one, contact the DOT and start ringing their ears a little bit. Maybe, hopefully they can find some for you.
That would be really good.
Yeah. And that's really highlighting the difference between some agencies that make sure that they do that public education component after the project is done, that they make that a part of finishing the project, releasing it to the public instead of it just being cataloged and put in the museum again. So, good job.
Where is this Larson site you talked about?
North of Double Ditch, along the Missouri River, so north of Bismarck.
You said that those 5 or 6 different sites, you clarify them, classify them as Civil War sites. However, wouldn't they be more considered Plains Indian War site because the conflict itself would normally be categorized by what the objective or goal would be, whereas the Civil War, as we know, was between the North and the South, and out here, Dakota Territory in 1861 had just come into being. So,
Scarce. One would think. I mean, that's where I was really shocked that we actually had Civil War battlefields here. There's a Civil War battlefield mapping process. What is that called again? the federal agency that does that. It's part of the National Park Service.
Yes.
And they publish books of Civil War battles. And these sites are in them. These, like Killdeer Battlefield, that is one.
I think they did that because they were repurposing those regiments and they were reassigning them from the Civil War, like out west, to continue the fight instead of disbanding them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's essentially what it was, is that those, most of the men that were serving out here in any of those Civil War battles were actually still in Civil War regiments. So they hadn't been mustered out to a different specific battle. So that's why it just got rolled in, and I understand that's why it gets rolled into.
And it was during the Civil War too.
Yep.
So
So it's all part of that. They signed up to fight in the Army and
Go fight here, go fight here.
the trouble is, it wasn't like when the Union was fighting with the Confederates and everybody dug rifle pits and they had a European way of fighting. When you go and fight with tribes, no, it's not done that way at all. That's why the Union didn't do so well against, but they managed to destroy provisions, they managed to destroy a way of life, they captured a lot of people, and they killed people that had nothing to do with Minnesota.
Any questions? Ending on that lighthearted note? Lighthearted.